At issue this week, cutting ties with ICE. Some local law enforcement agencies are distancing themselves with the federal government's immigration enforcement effort. Ahead, I'll speak to the new Bucks County sheriff who recently ended a partnership with ICE that his predecessor began last year. Shifting strategy. The Trump administration makes moves to reduce tensions in Minneapolis following deadly shootings there involving federal agents. We'll get reaction from a Republican political consultant. Video you'll only see on NBC10. Investigators say these people installed a skimmer in seconds at a local business. Ahead, the ways you can spot a skimmer and protect your financial information.
NBC10 at Issue starts now.
I'm Valeria Aponte, Feliciano. Welcome to NBC10 at Issue. Backlash grew this week against the Trump administration's immigration enforcement efforts following the deadly shootings in Minneapolis of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. Here in Philadelphia, lawmakers introduced new proposals that would limit ICE operations in the city. It comes as protesters marched through Center City this week and demanded that ICE agents leave communities across the country. City Council members Rue Landau and Kendra Brooks announced the new proposal that would stop ICE from staging on city-owned properties, restrict agreements to deputize local officers, and restrict the sharing of personal data.
They are terrorizing our communities, and let us be clear, it is the black and brown communities of Philadelphia and across this country that is feeling the brunt of this, feeling the pain.
With this ICE out legislation, we're doing everything within the city's power to limit ICE activity in Philadelphia and get ICE out of our city.
It's not just Philadelphia. Bucks County new sheriff Danny Seisler issued an executive order in January that ended a previous agreement between the department and ICE. Seisler defeated Fred Herron in November's general election, months after the former sheriff announced plans for the office to partner with ICE under the 287G agreement. It allowed local law enforcement agencies to collaborate with federal immigration agents. Herron defended his efforts during an appearance on this show last year.
We're only dealing with people that have warrants for their arrest for criminal activity within Bucks County and in our region. I am not. We're not looking at people going to work. We're not going on calls and running people to see whether or not they're. It's only people that have current warrants for their arrest and have eluded law enforcement.
The primary motivation behind my decision to reevaluate my office's ICE partnership was truly the heartbreaking feedback I received from leaders in the immigrant communities.
In response to Bucks County Sheriff Danny Seisler, the White House tells NBC10 in a statement, this will only make Bucks County residents less safe. And, quote, jurisdictions that refuse to cooperate with ICE simply let illegal criminals roam their streets. A couple of weeks ago, Bucks County Sheriff Danny Seisler joined me in the studio to talk more about his decision to end the partnership. The interview was recorded before the shooting of Alex Preddy in Minneapolis last weekend. I am going to go straight off the bat. Why did you decide to end this partnership?
So first, I need to explain what this partnership was. This was something called a 287G partnership, where a local law enforcement agency can volunteer to have its own officers deputized to do ICE's work for it. And this was ultimately a public safety decision. This had nothing to do with politics. This is what was about what was safest for Bucks County residents.
Why do you say it's a public safety decision?
Because law enforcement relies on trust within the community to be able to do its job. And what we saw after our sheriff in Bucks County, my predecessor, signed up for this program, we saw people in immigrant communities who were terrified to call the police, to call 911, to report crime, to come into the courthouse and testify. And my local police chiefs were telling me that was impeding their ability to do their jobs. So, and it wasn't just a public safety problem for immigrants, it was a public safety problem for everyone. And that was the main reason I ended the partnership.
How much of the 287G agreement, as it's known, was actually implemented, and how much is there to unwind?
So my predecessor attempted to initiate this program last spring. There was a lawsuit by the ACLU which prevented him from fully implementing the program. The lawsuit was resolved a couple days before the election, and then we won pretty handily in the election, and the sheriff decided just not to implement the program. So it was actually never fully implemented.
This was one of your campaign promises, but how much was that promise influenced by the actions of the Trump administration since the president returned to office?
This was entirely about what was best for Bucks County, and not just for our immigrant communities, but for all 650,000 people who I'm responsible to protect and serve as sheriff. As I said, this was impeding public safety for everybody. Having 16 deputies, which is what happened under this program, 16 deputies were authorized to perform significant levels of immigration enforcement, and that's the program that I ended.
Sheriff, but what do you say to those who say illegal immigration is a public safety concern?
So I'd say a couple things to that. First and foremost, this did not eliminate all partnership with ICE. What my order did was it brought us to the point we had been doing for decades in Bucks County, which is we still cooperate when it comes to sharing information and turning over convicted criminals, people in our correctional facility. So if we have people who are in the country illegally and they're involved in human trafficking or fentanyl distribution or fraud or violent crime, we're continuing to turn them over to ICE as we have for decades under Democratic and Republican administrations.
The federal government is picking certain cities where they are stepping up immigration enforcement. What are you seeing in Bucks County?
We've seen some immigration enforcement in Bucks County, and we have a robust immigrant population. We have over 50,000 documented immigrants. We have an unknown number of undocumented immigrants. We have seen some ICE presence in parts of our county, but we haven't seen any major increase since I've made this announcement. So hopefully it stays that way.
You have said Bucks County is not a sanctuary county. How will your office work with ICE moving forward?
So what we did was about striking a balance between protecting our community from crime and protecting our community from fear. And what we heard in talking to leaders of immigrant communities is they want us to continue to cooperate with ICE when it comes to actual violent criminals, because frankly, those individuals are in their communities. So we are going to continue to have an open line of communication with all of our federal law enforcement partners to ensure that actual bona fide criminals, not people who are just here because they want the same quality of life as us, but true criminals continue to be deported as they have been for a long time.
The Philadelphia sheriff was highly critical of ICE earlier this month. Do you agree with what she had to say?
She was echoing an anger that so many people rightly feel, but she wasn't the correct messenger for it. As a law enforcement executive, we have our role in this process. Everybody does. Activists do. Politicians do. But we have to bring serious kind of policy remedies, and we have to cooperate with our federal law enforcement partners, our state law enforcement partners. And what she did was frankly counterproductive, and if anything, it emboldened the architects and the administrators of the mass deportation agenda by the Trump administration. It just wasn't productive. She was the wrong messenger, and I have to denounce everything she did.
I have to ask you, what do you say to those who say your actions are a political move?
It's purely based on public safety. Look, so Bucks County has 39 different police departments within it. My decision was based in large part, not just talking to immigrant leaders, but police chiefs. Those police chiefs they're not elected. Their only job is to protect and serve their specific communities. So after talking to them, this is what they wanted. This is what law enforcement leaders wanted. This is what immigrant community leaders, this is what elected leaders throughout the county wanted. My sole focus was protecting our community, and this was the right decision to do that.
How important was for you to have these meetings? And the reason I ask is because throughout my career covering immigration, I have heard from community leaders, from community members saying my elected officials are not meeting with us, are not meeting with our groups, are not listening to us, and are making these decisions that affect us directly without having us, making a seat in the table for us, or just meeting with us. How important was it for you to meet with these different groups and these different individuals?
Yeah, you can't do that. For law enforcement to be effective, you have to have the trust of the community. You have to be involved and engaged with the community. And actually, police chiefs throughout Bucks County are really good at doing this. There's really good community policing. Because I believe you can't tell a community, this is what you need from your police. You need to engage in a dialogue and ask them. And frankly, my predecessor torched the trust between immigrant communities and police departments, and I have a lot to rebuild. So a lot of that will involve me going back into the community leaders and groups to continue that dialogue.
Sheriff, thank you so much for being here with us at issue.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Coming up after the break, when NBC10 at Issue continues, we'll get the view from the other side of the political aisle. I'll speak to a Republican political consultant who was once in charge of reaching out to Hispanic voters in parts of our area. That conversation is straight ahead.
This is NBC10 at Issue.
Welcome back to NBC10 at Issue. I'm Valeria Aponte Feliciano. We're continuing our look at the concerns over ICE immigration enforcement operations. Before the break, you heard my interview with Bucks County Sheriff Denny Seisler about his decision to end a previous agreement between his department and ICE. It is part of a trend in our area where some communities are distancing their police officers from ICE. Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner is teaming up with other top prosecutors from across the country to hold federal agents who break the law accountable. The coalition is called Fight Against Federal Overreach. The group will take any federal agents who break the law to court. The move comes after the shooting deaths of Alex Preddy and Renee Nicole Good by federal agents in Minneapolis.
I view us all as being people who are trying to protect the residents of Philadelphia, protect the residents of the United States, uphold the Constitution and the laws, pursue justice. We're just doing it in different lanes.
Meanwhile, this past week, the two border agents who fired their guns in the shooting that killed Alex Preddy were placed on administrative leave. There was also a change in leadership when it comes to who is conducting ICE operations in Minneapolis. The president sent Border SAR Tom Homan there, replacing Border Patrol Commander Greg Bobino. Homan was brought in as part of an effort to reduce tensions in Minneapolis.
What we've been working on is making this operation safer, more efficient, by the book.
Homan says reducing the number of federal agents in Minneapolis depends on cooperation to access state prisons and county jails for targeted migrant removals. Joining us now to get his perspective is Kenneth Gonzalez. He was formerly in charge of Hispanic outreach for Jack Ciattarelli during his campaign for governor last year. Now he's a Republican political consultant. Kenneth, welcome to At Issue. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Following the backlash to the killing of Alex Preddy, the president seems to be changing both the approach and his personnel when it comes to the immigration enforcement operations in Minnesota. What do you make of the changes?
Well, I think the president is a very common sense person. I don't know exactly how much the president is changing as opposed to pivoting in this type of situation. I think the mainstream approach here, the mainstream opinion of the majority of Americans is nobody wants to see anybody die. We want everybody to allow ICE to perform its job, and we want to keep people as safe as possible. And if that means bringing in Tom Homan, who's always been the border czar, and trying to cooperate with these far left elected officials in Minnesota that have been trying to impede ICE, then the president is willing to do that. The president seems to be willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that his mission is accomplished in getting rid of these criminal illegal migrants, but at the same time protecting and saving as many lives as possible. I think that's an example of great leadership by the Republican president.
The killing of Alex Preddy has sparked another wave of protest and calls for DHS Secretary Kristi Noem to resign, even among some Republican senators. Do you think President Trump needs to make more changes? And are you concerned about the impact all of this could have on Republicans in the midterm elections?
So I don't think all of this is on Kristi Noem or on one individual in particular. I think that ICE has been doing its job. They've been doing a very great job, actually, in the other 49 states that they've been carrying out their operation. It seems that their issues are in Minnesota, where there are far left politicians who are telling local police not to cooperate with ICE. There are riots emerging in the streets of people that believe that ICE are some type of villains, comparing them to Nazis and other inappropriate names like that. But I think at the end of the day, the president is firm on his mission. ICE is firm on his mission. The majority of Americans, I think, like I said, they have the same opinion, which is let law enforcement do their job. Anybody that tries to interfere with law enforcement is doing the wrong thing. However, when law enforcement goes out and does their job, they should complete their mission without having to sacrifice any innocent lives. And I think that's the priority of the president, and that's the priority of the entire administration right now. And everybody seems to be working together now, both Democrats and Republicans, to make sure that happens. And that's exactly where we want to be.
But Kenneth, the outrage is not about what Democrats are saying. The outrage is that 2 U.S. citizens have already been killed by agents that, like you mentioned very well, are there to implement immigration operations.
Right. But when U.S. citizens try to interfere with the job of ICE and they try to get into the way of a routine operation, then that's where problems like this escalate. And I think everybody agrees that nobody has deserved to die in this case. And these have just been what seem to be accidents and unfortunate mishaps. But let's remember how all of this started. It was these U.S. citizens tried to get in the way and be the superheroes and prevent ICE from arresting criminal illegal migrants. And that is completely inappropriate.
Even at the beginning of his second term, we heard of Puerto Ricans, U.S. citizens, being detained. And if I'm not mistaken, one of the cases that we heard about was in New Jersey.
Sure, but you see, these are videos that emerge and they tell you one side of the story, which is U.S. citizen detained. And what comes out later is the full story, where ICE just so happened to be looking for one certain individual at the same address, for example, and this U.S. citizen refused to provide ID or cooperate with ICE. And that results in a person getting temporarily detained. And although that should never be the case, it all goes back to the same premise that we discussed in the beginning, which is if people simply cooperate with law enforcement and try to stop getting in the way of law enforcement's operations, then none of this would be happening. And I think the relationship between the public and law enforcement would be a lot better without a lot of these lies and little tactics peddled by the far left here in America.
What is your reaction to the moves we've seen in our area where some elected leaders have chosen to push back against ICE?
I think that's the prime reason why we see all of these violent protests emerging, because politicians on the far left are trying to villainize ICE and making ICE out to be the villains in this scenario, when at the end of the day, ICE is just doing what the American people voted for them to do. And I think if we can better the relationship between the public and ICE and the administration, then things are going to be a lot better. ICE is an organization that has existed far beyond the Trump administration, and it seems like nobody had much to say about their operation until now, when they're just trying to nitpick on President Trump and what he's been trying to do, when at the end of the day, this is something that's been going on for a very long time.
Kenneth Gonzalez, thank you for joining us today at Issue and sharing your views.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up after the break, spotting a skimmer. Investigators say these people only needed seconds to install one at a local business. Ahead, the ways you can identify these devices so that you don't become a victim.
This is NBC10 at Issue.
A story you'll only see on NBC10 Response, protecting your financial information from card skimmers. A Trenton small business owner contacted us after he saw this duo come into his store and install a skimming device. I talked with the owner and law enforcement about how to spot these skimmers so you don't become a victim.
Frank Beltran owns Bienvenido Market, a local deli and mini market in Trenton. Last month, he says a man and a woman came into the store like any other customer.
He was talking to me. He was talking about one article behind me on the top.
But when Beltran went around to grab the deodorant the customer was requesting, he heard a noise.
I heard something. Kind of clap.
Beltran says the sound came from the woman touching the pin pad of his card machine.
So when they left, I went around, checked my pin pad.
To a naked eye, he didn't see anything wrong.
He tells us once he got home, he had a gut feeling telling him to check the surveillance video. So he did. And look at what he found.
The skimmer. So I found that they was putting that on mine.
The next morning, he called the police.
We've reviewed the video surveillance that he provided, and we're trying to identify the suspects.
Detective Lieutenant David Ordili with Trenton Police says business owners and consumers need to watch for devices that can look almost identical to a real PIN pad, including the one in Beltran's case.
One of the first things they could do is kind of check the actual input for the card, wiggle it a little bit, and make sure that there's nothing that seems detached that may indicate that there's a skimmer on the machine.
Detective Ordili says one way to help you spot a skimmer, check for tiny holes or shiny spots on the machine or nearby surfaces where a hidden camera might be. When paying, Ordili adds, you should always cover the keypad when entering your PIN. In some cases, using tap to pay instead of inserting your card can also add another layer of protection.
They read the card through inserting the card into the skimmer part of it. So if you tap to pay, you can't read the card and then the information on it.
He also says to regularly check your banking statements. If you see anything suspicious, report it immediately.
They should contact the bank or the provider for the card, advise them that they believe that they had improper charges on their card, and let them go from there. They can file a police report with us.
I feel bad because it just happened to me, but it can happen to anybody.
It's also a good idea to turn on text and email alerts with your bank so you're notified of every transaction. That way, you can spot suspicious activity right away. And if possible, try using a credit card, since it's usually easier to recover your money after a scam compared to other forms of payment. Remember, if you have a consumer problem, scan the QR code on your screen for direct access to our NBC10 response complaint form. You can also find it on the free NBC10 app, or just give us a call. We'll be right back.
This is NBC10 at Issue.
Before we wrap up this edition of NBC10 at Issue, a reminder, we are counting down to the Milan Cortina Olympics. NBC10's Siobhan McGurl is already in Milan to bring us complete coverage before and during the Olympics, including behind-the-scenes looks and profiles of local athletes. The games begin February 6th here on NBC10. That does it for this edition of NBC10 at Issue. I'm Valeria Aponte Feliciano. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day.